Welcome to another conversation in People in Fundraising. This podcast features interviews with nonprofit professionals who discuss their career journeys, lessons learned, and enthusiasm for working in fundraising. And here is your host, the founder of People in Fundraising, Tim Wilson.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode in Season 4 of the People in Fundraising podcast series, where I invite guests on to talk about their career journeys and what they've learned, what joys they find along the way. I'm very excited to welcome Alicea Gaston to our program today. She is our first guest ever from Georgia, and we got connected through a previous guest, Jenny Kleintop, in Delaware. Alicea, good afternoon. How are you?
Hi, I'm well. Thanks for having me, Tim.
My pleasure. Thanks for saying yes and for representing the Bulldog State.
Absolutely. I do it with pride.
So, yeah, if you could just tell us really quickly, your title, where you work, and then we'll get into the questions that lead us then to hear about what you do, please.
Sure. So I am the manager of communications and stewardship for Wellstar Foundation, which is the philanthropic arm of Wellstar Health System here in Georgia.
Excellent. Thank you. So, yeah, I'm excited to hear more about your role and Wellstar as well. But before we get there, I always start off each episode with having the guest share with our audience how they entered the nonprofit field. So, Alicea, I'd love to hear your story, please.
Absolutely. No, I think that truly my passion for kind of giving back and the philanthropy space, I think I was really introduced to it way back when I was little. I think it's something that is certainly ingrained in our family dynamic and something that my parents have always kind of instilled in us to give back and engage with our community, and always encouraged me to take, various leadership roles with that. And so I think that early on, I always knew that I would love to work for a nonprofit, work within the philanthropy space somehow. And then as I got older, I found that I was really passionate about healthcare. My mother is a psychiatrist, and so I don't know if maybe somehow that kind of got passed down to me, the passion for healthcare and caring for others. But so that's really kind of where I think it all started. And then I did go to the University of Georgia, and there I ended up doing a double major. I did health promotion and public relations. And so when I left college, I was looking for something that really kind of melded the two together. Had a couple different stops along the way, but I always really wanted to work for the hospital that was in my community. So, growing up in a large metro city, there are a lot of different healthcare options, but the hospital that's closest to me is one that, all my family has relied on, my community relies on. And so I always knew that I wanted to work there. And so when they had a position open up, initially was a position in marketing that I was looking into. And then they actually recommended me for the foundation, and it was even better, than working in marketing. So it's truly the perfect mix of the two things, my two majors, but also, really my passion for giving back, but then also, being able to focus in on healthcare.
That's awesome. It's so great to hear that there was this nice convergence of your interests, your skills, and
Absolutely.
tying it to this long-held desire to give back to your community. That's gotta feel very refreshing, uplifting for you.
Yeah, when I'm kind of mentoring or talking to, current students, a lot of the time I'll just say, find something that's of interest to you now so you can explore it and learn a little bit more about it. But once you're out of school, you can really go on any path. And I do feel like it's kind of rare that the path that I took or the interest that I initially expressed, I ended up being able to actually like go down that path and actually pursue a career in those two industries. It really is the perfect mix of the two.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that. And now I'd love to have you talk, more about your current role with Wellstar and also Wellstar as a nonprofit entity. Is it
Absolutely.
Georgia based? Is it to the South? Anything you'd like to share?
Yeah. So Wellstar is actually one of the largest healthcare systems in Georgia, currently just in Georgia. However, we do develop models, care models, different programs and initiatives that are truly, things that can be recreated and replicated throughout the country. We have 11 hospitals, so we're an 11 hospital system, as well as, we have a lot of various other kind of healthcare facilities underneath that. But we're also the second largest provider of charity care in the country. And
Whoa.
so, we are a nonprofit, and that's definitely something that we value. It's instilled within us is we think that every patient deserves, expert, high quality, world-class care. And so that's something that we truly take to heart.
Yeah.
Um, Within the foundation, we fundraise for all those hospitals, every service line, and everything in between. So we do a lot of investment in things and programs, even outside of our walls. And that's really where, community partnership comes into play, where we can partner with, other organizations and helping to strengthen the work that we're both doing. So the foundation, it's the support arm to all that Wellstar does.
Oh, excellent. Great.
Um, yeah, and then my role kind of within that is, like I mentioned, I'm more on the marketing and communications side of things, and then more recently started working within stewardship. And so I've actually been with Wellstar for well, it feels like a very long time nowadays. You don't always hear people being in the same company for too long, but
Yeah.
so it's been over 8 years.
Awesome.
Um, and I've seen a lot in that time. And, my role has changed slightly, over that time as well. But initially, I was the first or the first marketing person that was directly under the foundation.
Cool.
And so we went from one marketing person to, as of a few years ago, we now have three. And so with that, scaling with the growth of our organization, do like in marketing and communications, you really support, it's a support role, right? So you're supporting everyone on the team, everything that they do. And that's actually what really excites me about it, and what I really enjoy about it is, I'm not pigeonholed to one area, or just focusing. I don't even just focus on one service line where I sit currently. So I really do help all aspects of our department, whether that's creating invitations or case for support materials, or supporting our grateful patient program,
Yeah.
things like that, as well as I'm also supporting our, like, any video development, telling stories, doing working on our newsletter. We did a revamp of we actually launched a new website in 2023 that was recognized and nominated for an award. And so really everything in between, and also supporting events, whether that's scripting or kind of thinking through, like different engagement activities, or, ways that we can develop the program, a lot of that. So that is more of like my comms hat. But
Okay.
then annual giving actually really sits under me currently as well. So I do support, all of our direct response. So our direct mail program, social media posts that help uplift that. Like I said, we have lots of digital, whether it's our newsletter or just digital communications that support our annual giving program. Encouraging our planned giving opportunities, as well as employee matching opportunities. So a lot of that, the strategy behind a lot of that does sit under me. And then, as I mentioned, my last hat, I guess, if you will, would be stewardship. Not last in order, but certainly not, the least important. So, um, obviously, stewardship is a huge part of the success of any nonprofit,
Yeah.
right? So that does sit under me. It's just one of my newer initiatives that I've kind of taken on. And so with that, really, focusing on, again, storytelling, how are we connecting and maintaining relationships with our donors? What kind of creative ways can we reach out to them? And just making sure that we're keeping those lines of communication open.
Yeah, you've got a lot on your plate.
Yeah. As that's the world right now, don't we all?
Yes.
But it's
I
fun. Every day's different. So that makes it a
yeah,
lot of fun for me.
certainly. Yeah. I think a lot of guests can resonate with that feeling of, yes, I'm wearing multiple hats, but there's always an outlet for energy and creativity in what I'm doing and the ability
Yeah.
to, go from, in your
Yeah.
case, communications to marketing to stewardship and mixing that all up.
Mhm.
Um,
Absolutely. And I want to kind of piggyback off of that too, because I do feel like, a lot of the time, people do feel kind of stuck, or maybe not every organization is truly open to trying new things. And I would say that that is one thing that I really enjoy, an organization that is gonna like listen to your ideas and help you execute on them. And help develop you as well, and encourage you to try new things like this, or
sure.
attending conferences and continuing learning. But we do a lot of trial and error. We do a lot of, oh, I saw this somewhere, why don't we try it and let's see if it sticks. And so not every organization is like that. And so I think that's really important as well, just to be able to grow yourself, but then also as an organization.
That's a great point. Thank you for sharing that. I had a follow-up question. You mentioned earlier, Alicea, that Wellstar has 11 individual facilities.
Mhm.
So I'm just curious, both sort of your work environment, are you hybrid? Are you in an office most days? And then
Yeah.
do you need to go out to those 11
Mhm.
facilities to kind of, touch base? Hey, what do you need from me, my department, in any of those three sort of silos?
That's a great question. So currently, obviously, after post-pandemic world, we are within my department, and especially like I am on more of the operations side of things. So we come into the office 2 days a week. The other days, I'm primarily at home.
Uh,
Um, Exceptions really being sometimes there's an event or video development, things like that where I do need to go in. Nowadays too, there are a lot fewer meetings where I'm going to a hospital to meet with a hospital president or a donor. A lot of those meetings are happening virtually. And so I don't personally have to visit all of our facilities, although I do enjoy it. I try to kind of go when the opportunity presents itself because I do think it's important to just be in the space. We, as 11, since we do have 11 hospitals, they're all in very different communities and they all have their own kind of vibe and feel to them. And so I think it's really important, especially in the role that I'm in, to understand what that dynamic is like at each one of those hospitals, because a lot of the pieces that I'm working on are, very specific to that community, and so it's
yeah.
important for me to understand, what they're kind of what they're passionate about in that area, what kind of some of their lingo is,
Sure.
so that those are the sorts of things that I try to stay connected and plugged into.
That's great. And you, without knowing it, you answered an impromptu question I was going to ask,
Okay.
I'm just imagining, trying to market to an urban population, Metro Atlanta or Athens versus
Hmm.
more rural setting, socioeconomic differences among patients, families, donors. So, yeah,
Yeah. Absolutely. We are one of the largest safety net hospital systems as well. And so we do support a lot of rural communities, a lot of urban communities, and suburban, right? All the
yeah,
things in between. And we have a lot of kind of Georgia being sitting where it is. We do have a lot of hospitals that are kind of on the borders of some of our neighboring states. And
Oh,
so we actually get quite a few patients, from like Alabama,
mm,
in different areas. And so, we do cater to a very large and diverse group of people. 1.4 million in Georgians rely on us for healthcare. And so, like I said, it's definitely something that we don't take lightly. And we understand that every community is unique. And so that's again one thing that we really focus in on at the foundation is understanding what are the exact needs in this community? How can we elevate support in that community? And we don't necessarily try to, make everything fit one mold,
sure.
but really trying to see how can we make the greatest and most sustaining impact in one area.
Mm, yeah, yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I think that's, important to share with our audience, just, having that awareness of different population groups, different messages, what's going to resonate. So I'm glad that you shared that. I
Yeah.
want to, as I do with a lot of guests, Alicea, I want to, this was in the questionnaire, have you talk about, as you've done already, like your professional role, but this question is about your volunteer affiliations. I'm always curious, with guests, where else do they devote time and energy and passion? And so for you, this next question is about how you've served on your alma mater, University of Georgia's Black Alumni Leadership Council. And I'm just curious, I'd love for you to share, how did this involvement come about?
Sure.
Why, what influenced you to say yes? And
Yeah.
what's been the most meaningful of your service
Okay. Yeah, well, I could talk about Georgia all day, so go dogs. Um, I will tell anyone, and I tell a lot of students this, or potential students. I was not necessarily super enthused about going to the University of Georgia. My parents really encouraged me to go, but I think it was orientation. I was like, oh, this is where I'm meant to be. It was something, just being around peers, being around people who I'm a city girl growing up in Atlanta. And so it's still kind of, you have that little, it's on a smaller scale, but
Sure.
you have that community there. And being Black in a predominantly white institution,
Mm.
there is a small population of Black students, and most of us know each other.
Okay.
And
Uh-huh.
as I was telling you earlier before we started recording, I'm really fortunate that I do live in a city that has a lot of career development and opportunity here. And so a lot of students who go to the University of Georgia, several of them will come back to Atlanta to kind of
Mm.
plant roots and go into their careers. And so there are a lot of us here in Atlanta. We have a huge alumni base here. And so, for me, I think maybe having that apprehension into initially going into UGA and then it just being the most life-changing, best experience, for me. I want to pass that along to future students. I would love to see, the number of Black students at the University of Georgia grow.
Mm.
And I also want to, if anyone is apprehensive about going there, I would love to share just my experience and my story and encourage them and, support them throughout their academic career.
Mm.
Um, and so within the Leadership Council, I've been on for 2 years now, and now I'm chairing the, of course, Philanthropy Committee.
Yes.
And so with this, again, I really do have vision. I think, of course, I have a unique perspective working in philanthropy, and that doesn't always happen when you're on like volunteer boards and things like this. So,
Mm.
I'm excited about what we have in the future. We raised $1 million as a council and alumni, our Black alumni supporters. So we are one of the first councils and affinity groups to actually launch like a wide scale fundraising initiative endowment and to reach this $1 million goal. So we're really excited about that. And we're coming up on 65 years of desegregation next year. And so, of course,
Wow.
my philanthropy hat is on, and I'm thinking about, okay, well, what different ways can we continue to celebrate this and grow this legacy?
Mm.
So, I'm very passionate about the University of Georgia. And I think too, a lot of the Black alum that went there feel very the same. And you can see that in their giving and how engaged we are. So very, very proud of that. Aside from the work that I do at the University of Georgia, I'm also a proud member of the Marriott of Roswell alumni chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, where I sit on the fundraising committee as well as the arts and letters committee. And then kind of, in past roles, I've also served on the board as VP of Communications of Association of Fundraising Professionals, Greater Atlanta, and some other, various organizations that I volunteer with as well.
Wow. Wow. I've got to say, you must be such an asset to the Black Alumni Leadership Council and the other committees where you bring that day-to-day philanthropic expertise perspective
Mhm.
to it.
Yeah.
And I
Hmm.
think you even touched on it. Sometimes these committees don't have people, they have volunteers, but the volunteers themselves have a very limited application and awareness of fundraising.
Right. Yeah, no, that's very true. And everyone has different levels of commitment and expectations and
Yeah.
how much time you can commit to something. And if you couldn't tell, I'm a very hands-on person. So probably more than the university even really asked for or wants. But I have ideas and I would love to see them come to fruition. And so, yeah, if I'm going to volunteer or commit to something, I want it to be something that I'm passionate about, very passion driven. And I think, I see and have a lot of creative ideas, and I'm going to do everything I can to really, put everything I've got into it.
Awesome. That's fantastic. I love having guests on that they're involved in their communities and however they define community, and to
Mhm.
have you talk about your various volunteer efforts is really interesting. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you. I'm definitely, I'm that friend that is always, communing folks, whether it's officially or unofficially. I think I thrive off of being around other people, and I enjoy that. So I think it's kind of bled into, my professional career path as well.
That's fantastic. That's great. Thank you. Alicia, for our last question, it takes a while to get to the actual question part, so if you can just bear with me
Okay.
and the audience too. But I do research on guests a little bit on what they post on LinkedIn, and as I try to formulate questions. You've mentioned in a LinkedIn post about being a theater geek growing up. So I'd love to hear more about that. And um, to hear more about it, I kind of prefaced your answer with a quote from a New York Times columnist, David Brooks. Last year, this time, he wrote about how he saw a Museum of Modern Art tote bag that read, quote, "You are no longer the same after experiencing art." And,
Mm.
for you with your theater background, I thought that might be interesting to hear about. And also tying into Georgia, native Georgian novelist and activist Alice Walker once, quote, lamented that she lacked role models, unaware of enough Black female writers who could serve as exemplars. and
Mhm.
inspirations as Alice tried to perceive her world and tell her stories.
Mhm.
So it's a two-parter, and thank you for your patience. On that first quote from David Brooks, what art has fundamentally moved you in a way that you're no longer the same, please?
Yeah. Well, Tim, let me say thank you for your research and for coming up with these great thought-provoking questions. I read them in advance and I was like, oh, he did his research. I appreciate that. I told you I am a podcast enthusiast myself, and you can always tell when the interviewer has zero background. And so, hopefully, I think that the work that you're doing is very admirable, and and
Thank
I can
you.
see that you care and you're putting the time and effort into it. So I appreciate these questions.
Thank you.
Um, I think when I was reading this question, I thought, okay, well, what was my first, spark? What was the first thing that really moved me when it comes to art? And I started because I'm all about, I love live entertainment, especially, or live performances. Everything from comedy, ballet, orchestra, and all the things, even sports, all the things,
Yeah.
right? So I just
Yeah.
love that. I think, the electricity of being around people. And as you mentioned, I did from a very young age, obviously started off in ballet, as many little girls do. But then I got into community theater and did that for a very long time. And also I was, all the choirs and show choirs, or all those things, right? But I think what really, aside from just maybe one piece or one performance or show that really kind of got me into it, I started to think. I just went to a play recently at the Fox Theater here in Atlanta, and I was just so excited before the show even started. I was sitting in my chair and I was just looking around at the audience, and everyone's kind of in their own, engaging in conversation. And then the people start showing up on the stage and everyone's just excited and they start clapping. And then you hear, the orchestra pick is kind
Yeah.
of warming up. And then all of a sudden the lights go down and it's just everyone's engaged, right?
Yeah.
And I think that is really it for me.
Uh-huh.
Um, it's not even like one thing. It's just every as a audience member, we're all in this together. When I hear one person laugh, it's gonna make me laugh. If I hear someone's phone go off, it's like like, but that is like
Right.
part of it, and
Yes.
and then as a performer, like one night you might make a joke and it hits, it just lands perfect. And then the next night you might mess up a note and then so like all of that. And every audience is so different. It's just so alive. It's like an organism almost. And you're all in that for that, 2 hours. You're there together, experiencing that and enjoying it all together. And I think that's really what I love the most.
Yeah. I love that framing, like that communal experience.
Mm,
'Cause you're right, we all can relate to that. And there are some very common elements you talked about. The lights go down and the
yeah.
performance starts and the cell phone goes off and
Yeah, yeah. We all have been there. Yeah.
yeah. And I think, as you were talking about, whether it's ballet, sports,
Mhm.
comedy, like I was thinking back, I grew up going to the circus in Boston, the Ringling Brothers Circus, and my dad would take me, and I mean, I'm almost 50. I can still remember walking up, and I was probably 8, walking up this, kind of crusty ramp, going up to the seats and
Yep.
just the
They're
anticipation.
crickety. They don't feel secure.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And
And
you're
that
like, where am I? And then all of a sudden it's right in the middle of the tent, it's just amazing. And you
totally.
almost forget about all of that. It's like it's so part of it. It's part of the experience, and that's why you love it. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I think, then so like the anticipation, the
Yep.
getting to the venue and then the actual
Yes.
performance.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that memory. And I'm glad
Yeah.
that that sparked for you, because that is so much of it. Like you'll remember that time that y'all shared together and that
Yeah.
memory. in the moment, it's just, oh, it's just another thing we're doing, but those
Wow.
are the things you really do look back at, and the detail that you remember. It's the random things,
Totally, totally, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's also interesting, like, yeah, how society has evolved. And in my case, like with the circus, like back in the,
Mm,
turn of the 1900s up to
yeah,
the 40s, 50s, like
so different.
you'd have a whole town
Yeah,
theoretically, because that's the only entertainment that would come to
right.
town.
Exactly.
And
It's like
we've
the
lost
fair.
that.
Yeah. Everyone's
Yeah.
there. Yeah. No, you're
Yeah.
so right. Yeah, it's
Um,
interesting how art has evolved.
Totally, totally. So thank you for sharing that. I'd love to hear your reflections on the Alice Walker quote too about, who
Yeah.
served for you as exemplars and inspirations, and
hmm
maybe who has helped you tell your story, Alicea.
Yeah. No, this is also a wonderful question. Thank you for asking. Of course, I feel like I have to actually answer kind of that. Everyone's going to say their parents, right? But I do think that my parents really created a space for me to be creative and to express myself and to try different things. And with that, there was a lot of exposure to a lot of different, if I was like a traveling performer, going to different cities and things like that, traveling,
Yeah.
you get a lot of exposure that way and you're meeting a lot of different people. So truly, I do appreciate that my parents allowed that space for me because I do recognize that not everyone has that opportunity and that level of support. Um, and then there are definitely, I think that it's been a beautiful thing to see over the past few years how minorities within various art spaces, but specifically around, television and movies, how they have really, they're shining,
Yeah.
like there are more lanes, there's more opportunities, and whether it's kind of behind the scenes or in front of the camera. We're seeing a lot more representation and a lot of various stories being told. And with that, I think that I don't know if there's one movie or a television or anything piece of work that like really resonates with you where you're like, oh, I feel seen.
Mm.
And I think that I had that moment along with a lot of my friends and especially my girlfriends. There's this TV show which is probably like kind of embarrassing to share here, but it's called Insecure. And it's an HBO show by Issa Rae. And one, just seeing her development, she started off as like doing YouTube and now she's like grown to have all these various channels of media. And but she had this show called Insecure, and like me and my friends, and really I would say a lot of the Black community was enthralled. Like it was just seeing us, our community, our culture, like all the little quirks and like funny things that we say. And, like it was just so fun. And then, of course, it was like great age of Twitter, now X, and
Right.
everyone was just communicating on there. And, and then pandemic hit and it was still running. So, of course, we're
Mm.
all having like virtual watch parties and, like it was just, but seeing that show, just, I was like, oh, she gets it. She's part of, it's not someone else telling a story to me or someone who's kind of trying to interpret, but she is part of this culture, this understand. She has a true understanding in her team. Also, you can tell it's like woven throughout, right? So I
Yeah.
think seeing what Issa has done has really been inspiring. And I know that I'm probably pressing up on time, but there's one other person I definitely want to mention
Sure.
is Charlayne Hunter-Galt, who was actually one of two students to help integrate the University of Georgia. And I've never met Miss Hunter-Galt personally, but I have attended, several events honoring her and have known about her since I went to the University of Georgia. She's also a member of my
Oh,
sorority, Delta
awesome.
Theta. But she is a journalist, and not only did she, help integrate the school
Mm.
and all the adversity that came with that, but she is
Sure.
a journalist journalist, and obviously that's one of my passions as well as storytelling. And I love that about her as well. But then I think something that kind of gets overlooked, and I don't know that many people know, that when she was at the University of Georgia, she actually found love. And I just think there's so much beauty in that, with all the chaos and hatred and things going on, around her.
Yeah.
Somehow she found
Yeah.
this person, who eventually became her husband,
Mm.
and they fell in love. And I just think that's the most beautiful story. And I've never had the opportunity to tell her. So, maybe she'll see this. But
Yeah. Yeah.
but yeah, I just think I've been really inspired by her, and I always thought, I would love to learn more about her. So I think it would make a great movie one day.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing all of those exemplars and inspirations. And as you were mentioning Charlayne Hunter-Galt, I thought, and her integrating UGA, I'm a history major, and so as I was listening to you, I'm like, okay, I haven't heard her name before, and
Mhm.
that's too bad. But I
Yeah.
think of, like, well, I know James Meredith, University of Mississippi,
Okay.
and I think that was in like the mid 1960s, integrating Ole Miss.
Okay.
And then, of course, Ruby Bridges in Arkansas.
Sure. Yep. Yeah.
Um, but you touched on, for me, a really emotional and profound aspect is like they they did more, and
Right.
certainly the integration was
Hmm.
crucial.
Right.
But that was not the full stop of their experience. Charlene, as you mentioned, found love, and like they are full individuals with a
Exactly.
variety of experiences, and definitely let's
Mhm.
honor and celebrate what they did to integrate. Let's
Right.
also dig deeper too. What is their
Exactly.
story?
Right. You're exactly right. When you see movies, they're often told from, just like that one lens, right? And if someone asked, "Hey, Miss Charlene, I would love to do a movie about you," you would assume it's going to be about, integrating the university. But like
Yeah,
you mentioned, she has, so many awards, is so well respected for journalism and her storytelling career. And just kind of, what even drives her
yeah,
in that respect as well. And like, what's her favorite story? What's the favorite story she's ever
yeah.
told? Those are the things that I would love to learn about. And yes, certainly, having with that backdrop, I can just, I picture it like having that backdrop of being at the University of Georgia, but then connecting with a student there. And at that time, of course, it's a white student, and that, of course, is also, adding fuel to the flame, right? So there's just a whole nother path and things that we probably will, I don't even know if we'll ever learn about, right? But
Right.
it's just such a interesting perspective for me. Hmm.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so glad that you put that into our conversation, Alicia. That was really touching. Thank you.
Good, good. Thanks.
Yeah. Well, this has been just a delightful hour. We
Oh.
typically, with guests, I typically spend a few minutes before we record, and um, so I know a little bit more about your story, from what's being recorded and aired, and it's just been very delightful, Alicia. So
Oh,
thank
well,
you.
thank you. This has been a pleasure for me too. This is my podcast debut.
Hey.
Hopefully, it won't be my last. Like I told you, I love podcasts, and I do love storytelling. And I think one like this, where you're really going beyond the headlines, like you're really digging in. You had wonderful questions, and
Thank you.
um, I love just like learning about different people and what they're passionate about and what makes them tick. So I think that this is wonderful. I applaud you for all of the work
Thank
that
you.
you're doing. And man, 4 seasons, you're killing it. That's awesome.
Oh, that all of that means so much to me, Alicia. Thank you. Yeah, and especially, a lot of my guests now are people that I've not worked with. I've never met them in real life.
Mhm.
Even up to an hour ago, we had never heard each other's voices.
Right.
Uh, um, and so, yeah, just to welcome you and have you participate in the people and fundraising community is a real positive. So thank you very much.
Thank you. The pleasure is all mine.
And thank you to our audience for tuning in, whether you watch or listen. In early March, you'll be able to find Alicia's conversation across various platforms, Spotify, Podbean, just the audio only, and then LinkedIn and YouTube will have the full audio video recording. And then gratitude and acknowledgement to Luis Diaz of the Donor Participation Project, a past guest. He is sponsoring my new People in Fundraising website, which you can find at peopleinfundraising.wordifysites.com. Alicia's conversation will be on there as a featured episode as well. And Alicea, I hope we keep in touch, and I wish you all the best.
Absolutely. You as well, Tim. Thank you so
Thank
much for
you. Thank you.